Hello, Drunkduckers. This is Ozone Ocean, and with me is, or are, Banes and Tantz Serene. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Tantz.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I got distracted. I will now stop being distracted.
It's okay. All right, so we're all here, and we're going to talk about novels. Now, because this is Baines wanted to ask you about novels or novel writing. Now, should we also talk about just novels in general? You know, our favorite novels, what novels influenced us, what novels we like, novel structure, all that kind of stuff as well. Just to
Why not?
expand it. All right, before we get into that, then theme song. Hi everybody. This is Quackcast number 747, and this week we're going to chat about novels and creating novels. But first, we go to the featured comic. I featured a comic called Kingdom of Cats, so I'm going to tell you about that now. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Kingdom of Cats. Kingdom of Cats is about a kingdom of cats, so it's very honest in that way. As we all know, cats are pure royalty, from the smallest kitten to the largest lion. They're regal, proud, elite, lordly, graceful, clever, and very superior. But they're also very childish, super greedy, silly, dopey, jealous, grumpy, lazy, loud, entitled, and messy, just like human royalty. Cats' Kingdom of Cats depicts a whole range of characters like that, especially the king and the princess. It's as funny, colourful, and cute as you'd imagine it to be. The art is full colour, and it's a comedy newspaper-style comic. So have a look at Kingdom of Cats. Because it's a newspaper-style comic, it's very easy to read through, and you'll enjoy yourself, and you'll read through a whole bit, and you'll just continue reading until you get to the end, I'm sure. So this is a comic by Rachel R. Mills. Rachel 187 is her name on Drunkduck, and it's rated E for everyone. So read it and have a look. See if you would like it as well. That was Kingdom of Cats. Who's cool for cats? I'm cool for cats. Okay, so after that we have the featured music. So Gunwallace wasn't able to do a featured bit of music this week. So I will come up with the best of Gunwallace. So my best of a Gunwallace will be Ginger and Shadow, which is another comic about cats. I thought that was a great idea because our featured comic this week was about cats, and may as well make our theme about cats. And this was a theme that was done in 2015, the 3rd of February 2015. So let's see, that's just over 10 years ago now. So it's a great time to reprise it. It's lovely string music with the competing themes representing two cats. So it's very well illustrated. It reminds me of Peter and the Wolf in that way, where the music represents the different characters, the animals within the music. And Ginger and Shadow does exactly that. You hear the violins representing either one sort of just playing with each other and swooping around and up and down and over and under. It's lovely. So I hope you enjoy Gunwallace's theme to Kingdom of Cats, which is of course a comic by Mr. Barry Corbett. So have a listen and have a read of the comic. Okay, no more talking. Here's the music. hope you like that best of Gunwallace. So there we are. All right, so now we're going to talk about novels. So novels. Novel is what we call long form prose, basically. Is that a good description?
Yeah, I think there's some kind of a technical division of the number of words. Like this is a short story, this range, and then this range is a novella, and then this range is a novel. I'm not positive on the numbers, but I think it's somewhere around 60,000 or maybe 75,000 words, roughly, up to whatever, 200,000 words or whatever or more is a novel.
So if I just like start off like writing a short story, then I get bored and just go copy and paste like and I get up to 60,000 ands copied. That's a novel. I'm done.
Yeah.
That's all.
Maybe not a great one.
A very disturbing one, but it's
like you and Jack Nicholson. Shining.
Oh yeah, well all work and no play makes Jack something. A dull boy. Well, but
still, didn't have an ending.
Well, yeah, I mean, so yeah, novels are long. So yeah, like over like I don't know, 100 pages, something like that. 60 pages is a novel.
Even a short novel. Oh boy, that's a good question. Even a short novel, I think, is usually over 100 pages.
I wouldn't call 100 pages a short story.
No, it would be a short novel.
Yeah.
So any less than that would be very short.
Yeah,
novella, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that's overly technical, and I think after a point it might even be pedantic. Like a short story is supposed to be like let's say no more than 10 pages. Is more or less roughly. All right. If you want to get if you want to address it by content, a short story is one where you basically do not have a B plot. It's just an A plot, and that's it. Whereas a novel, one where you have a B plot, a C plot, what have you. You have more complex plots happening. Whereas in a short story, it's supposed to be like short and sweet, one and done. Like one problem to be solved, that's it.
Yeah, they're very clear and concise generally, whereas the novels could be a bit more expanded. I remember when I first started reading novels, I first started with like I don't know, The Hobbit, things like that. Narnia books, I loved those ones. Nice and short and concise. And then that drew me on to the sticky world of fantasy. And the fashion back in those days, this was in the 80s, was not to have one fantasy book like Narnia ones, just was to have like they basically, the fantasy writers back then were copying C.S. Lewis and Tolkien by having series of books. So you couldn't just read one, you had to read like 3 or 4 or 5 would be part of the series, and the books would be huge. Like they'd start off like 300 pages would be a short one, and then they'd get up to like 400, 500, 1,000 pages, some of these novels. I think, oh my god, you're just going over the top. Not only is this book 1,000 pages, but it's not even finished when I read it then, because I have to read the second part and the third part and the fourth part. So I would say, whereas novels can be any length, to write a good novel, you should be a bit more tied up. You shouldn't just go on and on and on and on. Like there should be there should be a neatness to it, a cleanness to it, I would think. Don't you? Wouldn't you agree with that? Or
I would say, I guess what I would throw out there is that it should be a big enough problem to solve or a big enough kind of story to resolve that it justifies its length, Even though novels are allowed to take little side trips and stuff like that, like you can't really do in short stories usually. If the story is big and takes, I guess, is any story that big that you need 3 huge novels to tell the story? I don't know. But if the story is big enough to justify the length, it can be long.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a lot.
That a little bit because my 2, almost 3 novels are just basically one story.
Ah, and are they long? How many words roughly do you think your novels are?
Oh my God, I don't
Or do you know?
remember. Like it's, they are like the normal size book, but they are the normal size book at like 700 pages. It's a long, long, long book.
Tantz is one of those writers. Oh my god.
I am. That said, it is fantasy and high fantasy a lot. So those books tend to be bigger as a rule.
That's
So
true.
there's that. Again, that said, how shall I put it? It depends on how big your story is. And what I mean by that is um, how the plot that you are going to tackle, is it going to be overarching over a lot of characters, or doing things like um, exploring an entire world in certain ways, or is it going to be a um, very focused story on a very specific issue in the life of a very specific person or a few specific people? And I'll give an example. Um, so, for example, take Tolkien, or take any kind of fantasy. Usually, high fantasy is all about setting up a world, giving it huge stakes, like the world is in peril itself, and the whole idea is to explore a certain question, usually existential question, or a highly political question that involves whole systems and whole countries and what have you. Um,
Yeah.
which makes a story by nature be big. Now,
Yeah.
you could also have a much smaller novel that explores how one character transforms over, say, a very significant event. Um, for example, one of my favorite novels is by uh, two actually, but they are very similar in nature, by the same author. Her name is Alki Zey. She's a Greek author, but has been translated in like every language there is. Um, so if you catch her books, I highly recommend them. One is By the Railroad Tracks, is one title, and the other one is the Lion in the Window. And both of these stories are about young girls that come of age during war or revolution, depending. Like one is coming of age during the revolution, like the Russian Revolution, and the other one is in Greece and she lives uh, through the occupation. So in World War II. So both of these stories are like 300, 400 pages, like a short novel, right? Why? Because the author doesn't explore the world. It explores how this girl changes from being like a very innocent young girl into someone that has to handle trauma, has to handle being political when she is too young to be political, and so on and so forth. And so certain choices are explored, and then the story ends. It is a much more compact world, a much more limited range in what is being explored. So that makes for a shorter novel. So
Right.
Yeah. Or you can be wordy like I am and just blow up the page count.
Well, that's it too, right? Yeah, some writing is wordier, like some prose is wordier, some is more sparse.
Hmm. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
uh, but the general principle does guide that. Like, look at huge novels like, look at Les Miserables. That's a very big book as well, right?
Mhm.
So he, like Victor Hugo, explores a lot of characters, a lot of people in different social classes dealing with the same stimulus, the same situation, and what they do with it, and what happens to them over the course of their lives. Like everything revolves around one main character, that is Jean Valjean, but you have like a huge cast of people that Hugo uses to basically show how society is very ill.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dickens did exactly the same thing, didn't he?
Yeah,
Over and over and over.
right.
Yeah. And his books usually are very big as well. Look at Bleak House for oh my gosh. uh, but not only that, like even Oliver Twist or David Copperfield and stuff, they are also on the larger side, if not affiliated for kids. So.
Yeah, yeah. But, yeah, so they're... But novels don't always have to be huge, you know. There can be some really nice, little concise things where, like, when the novelist is, especially with sci-fi stories, I found, like, especially like in the if you get sci-fi stories from the 60s or 70s or the 1950s, where the author's wanting to tackle a particular philosophical topic or a particular idea, and all they need to do is have all the plot and the characters sort of focusing around that idea in order to ex- to reveal the idea, explore the possibilities, and then come to a conclusion about it. And so it's a very kind of clean, very streamlined project. So I can appreciate that way of writing as well.
Mm-hmm. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Um, so yeah, that's. I mean, the length of a story basically. I mean, I wouldn't define a novel by its length. If something is a novel by its length, I would divide. I would define it more by
It's
how many
content.
plots. Yeah, how many plots does it explore, and that makes it a novel
Okay.
story, or a vignette. Even a vignette is very very short. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's good description. I remember reading a because I used to be really into old fantasy and old sci-fi, and I remember reading a few of the earlier versions of stories where these novelists became quite famous with their later novels. But they often started them out with short stories that they would release to the pulp magazines and things in order to make a bit of money. And after they'd done that, then they thought, actually, this idea has a bit of a legs, and they would expand that short story into a full novel,
Right.
by adding other plot lines and stuff like that. So you're perfectly able to do that. You could start out with a short story and just expand it, tackle those ideas or add a few more plots and stuff like that in order to go
Absolutely,
forward.
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
I think
Uh,
Isaac Asimov is one who had
Oh yeah,
robot stories, and they eventually that world, not the exact characters, but like that concept, became his robot novels.
yeah. I read
The
some of
book
those ones.
Fahrenheit 411 was a short story first, and became the classic novel. All that stuff. Probably many many examples.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yes, I was telling you guys I had the chance to meet Barbara from Agent 99 from Get Smart. I also had the chance to meet Ray Bradbury once, but I didn't go through that either. Damn it.
Whoa! Wow.
Oh, kick myself. Oh, famous writer, like one of the gods of.
I haven't read
writing.
any of his novels. I'm ashamed to say, but man, I have his short story collections. Some of them amazing. I mean, just amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
I would have loved to meet Isaac Asimov, but he died unfortunately.
Oh yeah, man.
Like one of the first victims of AIDS back in the late 90s, not late 80s. Sorry.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
Got it from a transfusion because they just didn't know enough about it. Yeah.
Jeez.
The world's best authors ever, with the most terrible
I
sideburns.
love those terrible Wolverine kind of sideburns. Yeah, I loved his books. He was interesting. Like the ones he wrote, was it in the 40s or 50s or something that he wrote his early novels?
He would have
They're
started
a lot
in
shorter.
the late 40s. Yeah.
Late 40s, and then he went and was a scholar and wrote textbooks and taught and did science and all that stuff. And then he came back to writing novels in the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
And they were much longer novels. The sequels, like he would finish his Foundation series, finished his Robot series, and the later novels were so much longer than earlier ones. Interesting, and they were better.
Oh wow. Okay, that's rare.
More full-bodied. Yeah.
Okay, so that because often when writers go back to things, it's like it's a cash grab or whatever. But yeah, they're doing something.
I mean,
better.
maybe I doubt it was. Maybe it was for him. I don't
know. No, go with
it. So when you write your novels, Tantz, you chart it out. Like, I mean, I've looked at a lot about story structure. I'm really into it. I love it. But do you like make a chart and make a list, or like this character starts here, ends there. This is the midpoint, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes and no. Because it is a fantasy, like sometimes I don't need to, but there are other times where I absolutely need everything plotted out.
Yeah.
And then the biggest thing for me, I mean, even before I started writing, like the first line of the first chapter of the first book, I needed to have an extremely good grasp of the fantasy world I was going to build.
Yeah.
And like so much so, like before I even started, I had a 2,000-year history of the world. Yeah, that I would basically never get to present in the book. It was just
Right.
the history, and then I would start building on that. And then I had like a roughly 20 years of like stuff that happened before the story begins with our main character. And while I was doing all that, I had to research basically everything, because when you build a new world, you have to build everything. How they build their houses, how they build their roads. Why is this country that way and the other one the other way? Like, what's the geopolitics of this place? Where, like, how is the map? What are the distances? The distances were the worst thing for me, because I had to commit, like, okay, this is how far apart these towns are, and this is how long it takes to get there with this speed. Like, I did all the math problems I never did at school. I did it all for this freaking math.
Yeah.
Um,
I hate doing that kind of stuff.
yeah. So, but anyway, I did all of that before, like, committing even to the, like, I knew the plot, but I, like, the stage A, B, C, D, E of the plot, like, before I plotted down any of that, I had to decide on, all of these distances, like the pedantic, really, really, the stuff nobody thinks about, but you will have someone that sits down to calculate all the distances and then tell you, like, they appear there when they cannot appear there, that sort of thing. So I didn't want that to happen. I set this challenge to myself, like
Yeah.
I will try. Like I know that there are always going to be plot holes in any plot because you are human and you cannot completely puzzle out everything. But my challenge was like I'm going to make it as airtight as I possibly can. So if a plot hole is found, uh, either I can explain it away by everything else that I have set up, or this person is going to be like a genius, and I'm just going to say, it's amazing, good, you found me, you caught me, that's what. So that was. It took me literally 80 years to come up with everything.
Literally 80s. Tantz is a lot older than me. Oh, it was already established Tantz was bad at maths, so it did take her.
So once you have all that thing, or once you do all the grunt work, the terrible work that nobody likes, everything becomes extremely easy. Some stuff write themselves. Even the problems that you set up for your characters, and how, because of course it's a high fantasy, I have a war taking place. Where the battles are going to happen, how the enemy is going to strategize, how the defending forces are going to strategize, and all of that. Everything writes itself after that because you have set it up and then you work on that. So logic takes over, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, things fit together and they work.
Exactly. So once I had that, and I knew the plot, start, middle, end, it was very easy to plot out everything. And then I didn't need to plot out everything in detail because I had all that background. And I just sat down and wrote it in, I think, like the first book I wrote out in 3 months, 4 months, and it was done.
Wow.
That, yeah. And
then
Mhm.
is there so you have your world all figured out, and I'm guessing along with all the real world type research for this fictional world, you have to figure out magic and how that works.
Yeah. The system of magic is fully developed. I have explanations for everything. I have linked it as much as I could to science because, like, it's science, like on steroids, like magic science.
Nice.
But yeah, everything is very thought out so that I can then work out the problems with the world rules, and I don't end up breaking a rule because I didn't think of it in advance, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Because then you create your own plot holes if you didn't research how your magic works properly, and that comes deus ex machina and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And I think, that kind of stuff is the thing that even the average reader would notice, like the inconsistencies. Like if that stuff doesn't make sense or isn't consistent, like I think a lot of readers notice that. It just starts to feel like, oh, this, like, what? This doesn't make sense. Why don't they just do blank?
Yeah, because if though Tantz, on the other side, if you did do that kind of writing, you might get picked up to do the next Star Wars movie. So.
Oh my God! Oh, yeah.
Everything comes back to Star Wars.
And yeah, my world basically, like the whole story. Generally, there are two kinds of authors in my experience, from what I have read and people I have talked to and stuff. They are the authors that want to explore a question. So everything basically is set up to offer like explorations of that question in the story. And there are authors that just want to tell an adventure. whatever that adventure is. And when I say adventure, I don't mean necessarily, pirates, wow, that's,
Yeah.
they want to explore a problem, but it's not like a philosophical question or an existential question like the other category.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, this is a cool problem. How would XYZ character do with this problem? And they tell that story. So
Yeah.
so those are two completely different animals in terms of how you approach a plot, how many plots you add, and how big the world is.
I think I would be the one who does the plot version, like the dealing with the problem
Mhm.
version or having an adventure. I'm guessing, I don't know if I'm right, but you are the other one. You're the
Yes.
question person.
Question.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I have a big question and a small question that I explore in this trilogy that I suspect is going to be a quadrilogy. I don't know, like 4 books
A
instead of 3.
quadrilogy.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah,
If it
uh,
a tetralogy.
yeah, that whatever that thing. 4 books instead of 3.
Yeah.
Yes. There are different ways of exploring questions, and there's bad ways and good ways, if you could say that.
Mhm.
When if it's just and if it comes up in the story and it takes a bit of mental work by the reader to work out that people are even asking a question, or if there's even that's even part of it. The bad way, I would think, this is me telling people what the bad way is when it's too obvious. When it
Oh,
becomes, it's not just obvious, it becomes the author using their characters to tell you how you should think about stuff.
oh
To
my God!
tell you
Yeah,
about
Yes.
that's propaganda. That is propaganda. That's a third different animal.
it.
Yeah, that would be definitely like proselytizing in a sense, like
Yeah.
yeah, propaganda. Uh,
Right.
I'm not interested in that. I was interested in exploring all the avenues that I have seen, and I have to say that the reason that the third book isn't finished, and I'm going to finish it now, and hopefully it will not become like the prelude to the fourth book. But if it does, it does, whatever. Um, is because I chickened out, and a couple of characters that I really like were wanting to do things that I didn't like, and I didn't let them. So um, I'm going to go back, and I finished the story, not letting them do their thing, and it didn't feel genuine to me. So I couldn't release the book, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I have finished the book. Why don't you give it for editing and stuff? Eh, I want to read it again. I haven't read it again after finishing it because I know I will hate it. And so now I have finally grown a spine, and I'm going to go back and read it and let the characters do their thing, even though I hate it. So
Wow.
yeah, that's why I'm still finishing this book. Um, so yes.
So you do all this world building and everything. That's really great. And then, but do you also kind of plot it out in
Yes,
terms of a drama, the story itself? Yeah.
yeah, and you have to plot it out so that you know when you are supposed to hit certain points that are key in your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do plot it out, especially to make sure that the timeline works, and that everything happens concisely within the timeline. And so, yeah, I do plot out point A happens here, point B has to happen here, and I do have this plot down. And
Okay. Right.
there are certain scenes that usually I write without plotting in between the point
Right.
A and point B. But
Yeah.
there are certain scenes that I have even diagrams for. I remember there is this one.
Flowcharts.
Yes, exactly. And there is this one scene that was the toughest for two scenes that were the toughest for me to write because it involved the interaction of like 12 characters all in the same room having to talk. And I had a plot to plot where everyone was sitting because I had to
Yeah.
remember who was next to who could see what in their line of sight, because they were supposedly all the war leaders in a very cramped room, in a very around a very tiny table with a map where nobody could see very well because, of course, they had just lost a battle and they weren't in their proper war room. They were in a smaller room, and everybody was already pissed, and strung up and stuff. So I had to see, okay, who is sitting with whom or next to whom, and who is standing, who is sitting down, and all of that. So I remember I had like two sides with post-its, and then the diagram in front of me as I was writing, and I had to consult it pretty much every few lines because I kept forgetting who was sitting where. Um, so there's that. So
Yeah.
that took a full plot out, charts, what have you, the whole thing, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
And there are,
Right.
other chapters where I just write and whatever happens, happens. So
So you were basically Charlie Day
Yeah.
from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, standing in front of a pinboard with strings attaching.
yes, exactly,
Arrows
exactly,
and text.
exactly. Yeah, and the second such chapter was this trial in a kangaroo court, uh, where I had to have, who is again sitting where, who is doing what, when must the X character come in, and all of that.
Oh
Oh,
dear.
Yeah.
yeah. So that was that. Everything else you need to plot out that way, but more than 8 characters, I have to plot them out.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an advantage of doing comics. I started to find like
Mm.
where you can actually see a scribbled, or the way I do it anyway, a scribbled version of the page. You're like, oh, these characters are together. We haven't heard
Mm.
from them in a long time. Or wait, they would have some little thing to say. So that's really
Yeah.
fun. A good idea. Good idea too, even for a book.
Speaking of comics, now I'm working on the plot for Without Moonlight Volume 2, and that takes a lot of plotting. Like, this is the first plot I have to actually map out all of it. Uh, why? Because everything, everywhere, all at once is happening. All the different resistance cells, all the different Nazi and fascist units, the people that are the puppet government, the people that are the actual government in Cairo. I have to have everything plotted, like know exactly what is happening, when it's happening, wherever it's happening, so that I can actually write the plot. And it is
That's a nightmare.
a nightmare. I hate it.
I I had that
Yeah.
feeling like someone I think used books made a comment in the forums like saying, "Oh, is it wrong to do a sequel? Or is it wrong to do a prequel in your comic?" And
Mm.
various people weighed in, and I weighed in saying that for me, for Pinky TA, I never do prequels or sequels because it's just all one comic. But in my chapters happen from whenever in Pinky's timeline. The first chapter, then the second chapter might be something that happened before, and then the third chapter might be something that happened afterwards, and then the seventh chapter might be something that happened like 20 years before, whatever. Like, that's just how I do it. So there's no need for a sequel or a prequel because I just tell different episodes from within Pinky's timeline. But it's, you need to have some level of plotting there because I'm thinking, okay, so how old would she be in this kind of thing? Who would she have met? Like, there's you can't just, do whatever you want whenever you want, because like things build up as the more you do. So yeah, she would have met these people, or she wouldn't have met these people before this situation happened. Certain changes to her, like she wouldn't have her ear plates then, she wouldn't have like different aspects of her clothing, her style. What's happening in the wider world, because Pinky TA in the beginning is sort of ostensibly set in the 1920s. Like, if it's happening like 10 or 20 years later, 30, 40, maybe it's the 1950s. Then what does that mean for the world? Technology has changed. And I have to be aware of all these freaking different things when I put these comics in different stages. It's a bloody nightmare. But once you have got it straight, like Tantz is saying, then the freedom comes out.
Yeah.
Because once your ducks are in a row, then you're free. You don't have to keep referring back to stuff because you've already done that. And that's in your head as like an automatic reference, and then you can just go for it. So it's worth doing. It's not like you're sitting there with flowcharts and tablets and notebooks and stuff like that all the time having to reference it. You only have to do that until you can get your ideas straight, and then you're good to go. I think that's a good thing to be aware of. So Tantz isn't saying that, you have to be mathematically precise every single step of the way.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to highlight that.
No. You only need to feel certain that you know what you're doing, more or less. If you know what you're doing, or if the story is of such a nature that you don't need to pre-plan for certain things, then there is no need to do this. Absolutely no need to do this.
Yeah, but if there is a reason to pre-plan, do it.
Yeah.
And then you've done it, and then you've done it, so you don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, and honestly, it's actually in the beginning when you start to you break the sword of your story in a sense by doing all this preparation, but then you can basically free write everything because you coast on all the work that you did, and you don't plot anymore. You don't need to plot anymore. It writes itself.
Yes, so to speak. But that means because you have done that, you've got the best of both worlds, because you've done all that annoying hard work. But now you're not going to run into stupid plot holes and messing stuff up and all that, because you've already got that stuff outlined. Whereas if you just free write from the beginning, say, who can be bothered with all this damn work? Then you run into all the plot holes and you run into issues and stuff like that, and blocks and things, because you've got nowhere to go.
And imagine getting 300 pages into a 700-page novel and realizing, this makes no sense. I need a massive rewrite. You have to do it all over again.
Yeah, that's exactly.
It happens anyway, maybe. Yeah.
No. It happened to me because when I first started telling, my book is The Act of Ailing. That's how it's called. The overarching story has three books under this. So when I first started writing The Art of Ailing, I did no work at all.
Yes, so there you go. Tantz is speaking from one experience.
Yeah, because I also was like a presumptuous young kid, basically. I was like 18, 19 years old, something like that. I felt that I was ready. So I had written something like 150 pages, something like that. And then, and I felt I was doing great. And then my mom asked me a question, and the whole plot fell apart because I was. Uh, so yeah, and then I said, okay, fine. I will never. I don't want to ever be in this position. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I scrapped the whole thing, and I then started planning everything, and it took me all the time it did. And I, like, it was 90, that happened to me in 1999, 97, something like that. And the story, I wrote it in 2004. So
Okay.
that's how long it took me.
Hit a bit of a run up there. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
That's when you finally thought, okay, so to solve this, I need Luke on this different planet has to go and milk the blue aliens. And...
I don't know what you're talking about. I have never seen it.
The greatest moment in cinema history, I'll have you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, dearie me. Yeah, it does help to plot things out and to work stuff out logically. Then you don't run into stupid, idiot mistakes and issues that can be so easily avoided if you just know what you're doing and have your world just have a little modicum of logic.
Yeah. And generally, what I would say is, if you want to just start writing novels, don't start with something that requires world building and, all this insane pre-work. Start with something that, I mean, definitely start with what interests you, for sure. But if you can set it in a world that is already set up for you, do that. Like, set it in the real world where you know your stuff already. Like, most of the stuff is already built in. Or, do yourself a favor and don't jump off the deep end.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, like if you want to do fantasy, start as a fairy tale fantasy. Fairy tales have a particular structure, and you don't have to do a world building to make a fairy tale make sense because they're set in an idealized world of the past.
Exactly.
They're not set in a totally fictional world. And yeah, sci-fi, you can limit your scope, make it something like Aliens. Aliens exist within a spaceship, basically, and little planet scenes, but nothing much, or Alien or whatever. It's rather encapsulated, so your world doesn't have to encompass planets and history and culture. It can be within a room, or within a spaceship or something like that. It doesn't have to be spread everywhere, which makes it a bit easier for you as a writer to create. You don't have to form everything. And like Tantz says, you can set it in the real world where you don't have to do any of that world building because presumably everybody knows the world. So you just have to characterize it in a particular way. You have to just illustrate it in the way you want it to be seen. Like a happy world, a noir world, whatever.
Yeah. You don't even need to say it is this world. Just leave it unsaid and let people assume and fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can say, Bridget Jones woke up in the morning, wrote in her diary, and then I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, exactly. You don't have to say it was a dark and stormy night in 1982 where the world was diving into ultra right-wing commercialism. Reagan was creating these plans and the Soviet Union was very angry and we had the Cold War, rumbling. You don't have to do that level of setting the scene.
Like, for example, look at the whole superhero genre. It's set up in quote-unquote real cities. or real-like cities like Gotham. And that's all. Like they don't need to abide by basically anything. It's just a city,
Yeah.
the way we know cities, and that's it.
Yeah, you don't have to tell us the tax structure of Gotham City, and what are the rules for like littering on the street and all this kind of thing. You don't need to
Yeah,
tell us that. But say if you're doing Judge Dredd, then it's different because
yeah,
that's
Right.
based on the weird legal system that they have. So you have to tell us what the laws are for littering on the street.
and you have to stick to that because if you have to convince the audience that your world is solid and lived in, so you cannot break rules. And when I say you cannot break rules, you cannot break the huge pillars of your world have to remain intact and untouched. And any rule breaking within your story has to be clearly shown that it is a rule breaking and has consequences. People would expect of rules being broken. So otherwise, it will feel like it is whatever you want it to be at any given time. So there are no stakes, there is no predictability, there is nothing except whatever the author wants at any given time.
Which you don't want.
Yeah.
Don't want that stuff because that lessens the interest of the reader. It's like in the real world. If there's no laws or rules in the real world, if you can't rely on anything, if nothing follows, if you do this and then this follows, if that doesn't happen, then people just riot. They can't live in that world because it doesn't function for them anymore. And it's the same as a reader or an audience member on a movie or a TV show. If things don't follow and fit, you can sort of like make some allowance and say, oh, it's arty or something. But even if even that's a stretch. It just becomes, okay, I'm tired of this. I can't focus on it. I don't know what's happening. Nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll leave that now.
Yeah, it makes
And
it a lot harder to care about anything.
yeah, plus you're probably going to frustrate your audience, and they are going to disengage, like Oz and Baines described, but also be pissed about it.
Yeah.
So,
Actively pissed. And never read or watch or anything that particular author ever again.
mhm.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's intimidating. I find the idea of it to be intimidating still. I found the idea of doing a web comic, even intimidating many years ago. So, I mean, I guess since I haven't written a novel, I guess my only thought would be what I've tried to do is write shorter things and get practice finishing things to prepare yourself to finish something bigger. You know?
I don't think it's that hard. It shouldn't be that intimidating because you just expand upon what you're already good at. You can write comics, you can write short stories. You just have to write
It shouldn't
a
it
longer
shouldn't
one.
be. Yeah. I mean, I'm the same. I'm a bit really into outlining, even shorter things. Like I like knowing where it's going, even if it ends up kind of changing. So yeah, plotting things out and understanding the characters and what they want and what's holding them back, and how are they gonna, when they really hit the wall, what's gonna be the bad way to solve it. All that kind of structure stuff of how a character arc works. So I find that stuff useful to study.
Yeah,
you know.
and I want to also say that if you do that work, while you are doing this work, you might come across cool things you hadn't in mind when you set up the original concept of your plot. Like get some cool ideas that initially were not in your plan, and
Oh yeah.
that will change your plot, but it will also make it more interesting and more engaging. And I'll give again an example. Um, so the whole plot in the first book is that there is this girl that does magic, in a world where magic is institution level prevalent, like it is a thing that happens, and with rules and laws about it and all that. And so this girl has this one unique gift that is that nobody can lie to her. If you try to lie to her, she will immediately know the truth. And she happens to be within a political family, so you can imagine how that works. and, and because again she is this kind of threat, the leaders of her country basically want her taken out of the equation, because anyone that is a wizard gets to basically be in the government by law. And they do not want her in the government when she grows up. So there is this whole thing that happens trying to basically assassinate her. And while a whole war is also happening at the same time. So the whole plot begins when she has to flee with her uncle, who is also a sorcerer. And my initial idea was that her uncle was going to go and try to warn her father of a treason that is going to happen during the war, and that is going to set them up to basically die in battle. Um, um, and while I was plotting this out, I realized, wait a second, her uncle is not that kind of person. He's the kind of person who will want safety first for the kid and then consider anything else. So he's not going to go with her to the front unless he's absolutely forced to do it. So his first reaction is going to be to flee and hide so that the kid remains safe, because that's his primary task, to protect the main character. Yeah. So instead of going to the front, that was my initial plot, now I had to factor in the fact that he goes to hide and go to ground, basically. And now I had a whole completely different plot.
Right. Yeah.
But it was a better one in the end. But, yeah.
Well, there are a lot of ways you could go with writing. You can focus on a story. You can focus on character, like deep character. You could focus on descriptions of the world. Like, there's a lot of writers that do that. That just go massive into building the world. And that, oh my god, can get really super boring. Like, yeah. But what's your favorite approach? We haven't got much time, but Tantz, you're like into a character and story thing more than anything else.
I like to explore characters a lot. So most of my stories are character driven more than plot driven. But I would say it is a balance.
And what do you like to read more?
Sorry, I didn't catch the whole.
No, both things. No, both things.
I don't mind. I like both. I like more character-driven stories because, again, I like to see what characters think and how they react and how they evolve and all of that. But I will gladly read a story that is more plot-driven. So.
What about you, Banes?
Yeah, I'm the same. I like a good plot. I like some comedy or some thrills or some whatever, but I think it's really about characters and the choices they make. That's what makes you care about what you're reading or what you're watching.
It is, yeah. What makes you care about it? I think that's an important kind of distinction. Because I don't really care about the world. I care about the characters within it.
Yeah.
That's the important thing. Always. I could not get through Gormenghast. I tried, or whatever it was. Like, he Mervyn Peake wrote those 3 famous books, Gormenghast and a couple of others. Couldn't get through them because he was too focused on describing every frickin' thing, and it just got bored to tears, and I stopped.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, not my thing. But we're getting to the end of the time for the Quackcast, so it's very pleased to talk to you guys about novels. So this has been Quackcast number 747. Goodbye, people.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.